Dan, are you guys set? Call us to order for our Tuesday, February 25th, 2020, Land Use and Public Hearing. Would you all please stand and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Ingalls, we have certification of our agenda today.
We do, Mr. Chair. The 4 items under item 2, A, B, C, and D, did not require any specialized notice, but they were properly noticed for today's public hearing. Item 3A, Sterling Ranch Preliminary Plan, required posted notice and published notice. That was accomplished on January 8th and January 9th, respectively. With that, you have proper notice and jurisdiction on all 5 items on your agenda.
Thank you, sir. Are there any commissioners' disclosures for any item on our agenda?
I have none, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I have none, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
And I have none. Our first item under number 2, our land use, is South Santa Fe Plan Development. Second amendment for a fee waiver request. This is project file SP 2020-007. Presenting for staff, Dan Avery.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dan Avery, representing Planning Services. ING Park Santa Fe is requesting a fee waiver of all planning, engineering, and building review and permit fees associated with a proposed commercial tenant finish application. The project is located at 3525 Carter Court, approximately 1/4 mile north of North Pinery Parkway along Highway 85. The site was formerly used as a landscape nursery and has been redeveloped with 3 office warehouse buildings. The applicant intends to occupy the largest center building on the site and is designing a tenant finish to accommodate a high-tech manufacturing facility with the opportunity to create up to 300 jobs on the site. As such, the applicant is eligible for some economic development incentives. To date, the applicant's review processes with the county have incurred a planning division review fee of $225 for a site plan modification. Building permit fees will be based on the total valuation of the proposed tenant finish within the building. Staff notes that fee waivers are granted at the board's discretion. The fee waiver would cover both the planning and building division fees in this case.
Any questions for Dan at this time?
I have none.
And I have none. Thank you.
Dan, can you does this follow the state incentive process that was created for this type of incentive request?
I can't speak to the full range of incentive offerings that have been made in conjunction with this application. I've reviewed a small component of the application related to the addition of some mechanical equipment on the site. The building division will review the tenant finish, so I don't know what other processes the applicant may have gone through.
All right. Mr. Ingalls, I'm just going to ask for a little bit of comment regarding the state incentives and the program that allows this.
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. I like Mr. Avery, I don't have information on what incentive the state might have granted in this case. I can say that the county ability to grant incentives are independent of those of the state. So fee waiver requests are solely within the purview of the board. The state would have no say one way or another if the board was so inclined to grant such a request.
Thank you for that clarity for my ignorance of recognizing this as a fee waiver and not another incentive type request. Thank you, Mr. Ingalls, for clarifying that for me. So no further questions for staff at this time?
No.
All right, I'll ask anyone in the audience if they would like to address the board regarding this application. No one in the audience, so I'm going to bring back to the board for any further questions, discussion, into our motion.
So, Mr. Chair, I would just like to make the comments that Douglas County is a very popular place for families to live. And we've been working to make sure that our foundations support businesses, because we know that if we have good businesses here and their families are here, they're close together and there's less traffic. It just makes good sense. So we have worked hard to create an environment where businesses can thrive. And I think this request highlights those opportunities so that we can offer the ability for an excellent company to come here and bring a lot of good quality jobs. And that will even make our communities better and stronger because of that access. So I'm fully in support of this, and I'm willing to make a motion if it's time. So I'd like to make a motion to approve a fee waiver request for the South Santa Fe Plan Development Second Amendment, Lot 1A1, Project File SP 2020-007.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Brings us to our next item on the agenda. Meridian International Business Center filing number 7C, Fifth Amendment. This is project file SB 2019-063, presenting for staff, Brett Thomas.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brett Thomas representing Plan Services. Project before you is Meridian International Business Center, filing number 7C, Fifth Amendment, project number SB 2019-063. Shea Homes is the owner of the property. The request is for approval of a final plat consisting of 135 residential lots, 8 tracts, and associated public roads on 51.84 acres within the Meridian PD. The intent of the final plat process is to provide for the review of final engineering plans, the subdivision improvement agreement, public dedications, and other legal agreements. Final plat process begins with submittal of an application, following a review period by referral agencies and the public, and acceptance of engineered plans. The request is considered by the board at a public meeting. The site is within Meridian PD and is located west of South Chambers Road and south of East Main Street. This is an aerial of the property and surrounding lots. Single-family residential development within Meridian 7C is located to the west of the site. Recently approved single-family residential within Meridian 7H is under construction to the north across East Main Street. To the east of the site is an open space tract, Tract Q, within Filing 7, and a reuse pond within Meridian is visible to the south of the project site. Site was rezoned from Agricultural 1 to Planned Development with approval of the Meridian PD 7th Amendment in 2004. Subject property was platted in 2004 as super block lots and tracts within Filing 7. The property was subject to additional subdivision approvals in 2012 and 2014. Board approved the 16th Amendment to the Meridian PD in February of 2019, which assigned 140 units to this area. This final plat layout substantially conforms to the preliminary plan approved by the board in August of 2019. The application proposes 135 single-family residential lots. The applicant proposes a design which includes approximately 37 acres in tracts with 3.6 acres for public right-of-way. In addition to public right-of-way, 30-foot wide alleys will provide access to individual lots. As requested by Town of Parker as part of its access permit process, the applicant is dedicating additional right-of-way for South Chambers Road. In addition, the applicant has agreed to construct the required 550 lineal feet of roadway improvements for XL-decel lanes to South Chambers Road, plus an additional 490 lineal feet of roadway improvements at the town's request to allow for a continuous lane of South Chambers Road. As included in the supplemental information submitted by the town yesterday, town staff has previously requested Shea Homes be obligated to construct trail connections to the north and south ends of the Newland Gulch Trail within Track Q, as well as dedicate Track Q to the town. Shea Homes has responded they will continue to work cooperatively and in good faith with the town to provide adequate trail connectivity within Track Q. Additionally, Shea acknowledged their intent to ultimately convey Track Q to the town. This is a view looking east into the property from East Stepping Stone Circle. This is a view looking west into the site from South Chambers. Existing single-family homes within Filing 7C, Second Amendment, are visible in the distance. These are the approval standards applicable to a final plat. Detailed assessment of the project's compliance with all standards is included in the staff report. All engineered plans, studies, and reports have been reviewed and approved by engineering. Staff has evaluated the final plat request in accordance with Article 5 of the subdivision resolution. Condition number 1, prior to recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall submit a signed copy of the certification of allocation of unused dwelling units as prescribed in Section F9E of the MERIDIAN PD. Condition number 2, prior to recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall provide payment in the amount of $500 per single-family residential lot to Douglas County for conveyance to the Douglas County School District and fulfillment of condition of approval number 6 for Meridian International Business Center filing number 7. Condition number 3, during construction activity within the development, the applicant, its successors, and assigns shall take all reasonable care to watch for historic resources, paleontological resources, and other cultural history resources, and shall immediately notify Douglas County and complete appropriate Colorado Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation data management forms in the event of such discovery. Condition number 4, Colorado Parks and Wildlife literature shall be made available to both prospective homeowners and home buyers regarding the existence of wildlife in the area and how to minimize conflicts. Condition number 5, prior to recordation of the final plat, technical corrections to the final plat exhibit shall be made to the satisfaction of Douglas County. And condition number 6, all commitments and promises made by the applicant or the applicant's representative during the public meeting or public hearing and or agreed to in writing and included in the public record have been relied upon by the Board of County Commissioners in approving the application. Therefore, such approval is conditioned upon the applicant's full satisfaction of all such commitments and promises. Section 504.06 of the subdivision resolution sets forth parameters for the board's determination on final plat requests as noted on this slide. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm available to take questions at this time. Otherwise, the applicant representative, Marcus Pockner, is here to present their request.
Thank you. Any questions for Brett at this time?
I do have a couple. So, Brett, you might have covered this in your presentation, and this is in regards, it was on page 11, involving Parker and the access probably to track Q. There was also on page 14 information about needing to pay a pro rata share for sidewalks and trails. So can you tell me, are those two related? Are they the same part of this application, and have those conditions or those questions been answered? So I'll back up. So my first question is about page 11. So under paragraph B on 11 says access, and the second paragraph talks about the town has requested the dedication.
Yes, and the final plat was updated to include additional dedication that the town of Parker agreed to.
Okay, so that's been taken care of.
Correct.
And then on page 14, there was a discussion about a pro rata share for sidewalks and trails. And I think that's to the town of Castle Rock. I'm sorry, to Parker.
And so that's a request the town of Parker has made. They made that request with the 16th Amendment to the plan development, that those be conditions of approval. The board did not make those conditions of approval. That comment has come back up during the final plat process. The town asked for the pro rata share in their referral response letter.
So has that question been answered, or is that still in the air? Or is that a question I need to give to the applicant?
It's probably best to have the applicant go into more discussion on the discussions they've had with Parker.
Okay, perfect. I have another question that's probably better for the applicant, so I'll hold that. Thank you, Brett.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a series of questions for Brett, and I'm looking through some of the staff analysis, and when I read this packet, there was a fairly stark piece of correspondence from the Centennial Airport Authority with regard to the fact that the proposed development lies within the airport influence area, the AIA. The Airport Authority requested a navigation easement and a 7-day noise test for residential development. Can you speak a little bit to that process with the applicant? And I'll probably follow up with Mr. Pochner and get some further detail from Shay. But can you speak to that issue?
So the airport influence area that Centennial Airport references was not adopted by Douglas County. The site lies within Section 19, which is Centennial Airport Review Overlay Area. A navigation easement's not required per Douglas County, per Section 19 for development within this area. The applicant typically agrees to do an overflight disclosure notice to neighbors or to home buyers. And then I'm not positive on noise test. I would defer to the applicant on whether they perform those or not.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate the overflight disclosure. I'm just referring back to the correspondence from November 22nd, 2019, where it indicates that the proposed development is in an area that has similar existing adjacent residential areas that also filed noise complaints in the area. It'll be subject to numerous aircraft overflights, their associated effects, including noise, smoke, dust, fumes, and vibrations. So I'll reserve further questions and wait for the applicant to make his presentation and then follow up from there.
And Commissioners, for the record, staff has handed me some exhibits. These exhibits were actually mailed to you yesterday. They include the comments, the late comments from the town of Parker. But I'm going to mark those Exhibit 1 just so you can have them in front of you and so they'll be identified for the record. They came in again by email yesterday.
I would just make a comment, I think, and I have no questions further for staff, but I think the applicant will probably address the issue regarding the airport influence area. I think it's probably pretty clear, so I look forward to that. I'm sure you will. I just want to make that comment. This time, I'll ask Mr. Pochner to come to the lectern, and I know you know the routine of name, date, and serial number.
You got it. Very good. Marcus Pochner, P-A-C-H-N-E-R. My address is 130 Rampart Way, Suite 225, Denver, Colorado, 80230. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to address you today on Stepping Stone, Meridian International, the filing before you today. We want to show that we have our entire team here. I'm honored to represent Shay Holmes. Shay Holmes is represented by Ryan McDermott. Our land planner, Phil Sage, is here, and our engineers are here as well if there are any questions. As it was very adequately covered by staff, here is the site, the Ridgegate transitioning to Main Street. It's at the southwest corner of Main Street and Chambers Road. This is the last phase of the development south of Main Street for the Meridian Village, as we call it, Stepping Stone. We have been working through this project for a number of years with Shay Properties and now Shay Homes. As you know, it is zoned for 2,500 residential units. To date, 2,051 units are platted, and then we are looking to add up to 135 homes on this site. Here is the filing itself. You have that, the county staff has gone through that. Just a few particulars that I think about the proposed plan itself. It is 135 single-family lots. This is the crescendo product that we have talked a lot about previously with all of you. It is 3.6 dwelling units per acre. That transitions and reflects all of the edge conditions in Meridian and the Stepping Stone community of very similar dwelling units per acre. We think it is entirely appropriate to transition to Main Street and Chambers that has a little more traffic. We actually have 37 plus acres of open space. That's over 60% of open space on this parcel. Really, to define this shape, you have to look at East Stepping Stone on the west of the site and also Sweet Sicily, the homes that are above there. A very substantial grade change that drops down onto this site. So those Sweet Sicily residents that are up here really look down on that site. We have been particularly mindful of them in this process. They live there today. And as you know, we've gone through a change from commercial to this, we think, very neighborhood benefiting residential development. A few of the site amenities, this was actually from a discussion with the community. We did a poll through their HOA. They wanted a basketball court, they wanted significant buffering, and they wanted playgrounds in this area. So these are specific things that they have asked for. The other thing that I'll point out here, transitioning again right from Sweet Sicily, we have met with all of those residents, and we are actually going to plant trees at their kind of direction at the back of their properties to help screen and make that transition. The other desire was to have a new dog park. So we are building a dog park that will have controlled access there for all of the residents of Stepping Stone. But the basketball court and dog park were specific requests of the overall neighborhood and from the HOA. And we think that's absolutely important to include into this. The trail system, this came up a little bit from Commissioner. I think one of the things I just want to point out is the 3,100 linear feet that we're adding of trails. You'll see in blue the trails that we're connecting actually to existing regional trails along Chambers, Stepping Stone Circle, and then eventually the underpass trail that is already built. The underpass is we will actually make connection. Douglas County will build that southern trail. I will, Commissioner Thomas, talk about the other side of the road. I think that's specific to your questions. This shows, and just for a brief reminder, kind of the things that have controlled our development, why we have designed it the way we have. As you can see, we have slid it as far east as possible to separate from the neighbors. We have really looked at two things. The neighbors pointed out this is a very dark intersection today. It's not built, so we're adding 2 street lights there. We have worked on very significant screening, buffering, and landscaping for those neighbors at Sweet Sicily. I talked about the dog park that we're doing. We also heard that the existing swimming pool we needed to expand that. We actually did a lot of work with the HOA. It turns out the pool is fine. It's the decking that is not adequate. So we're actually adding 1,600 square feet of pool decking. We've already contracted that with the HOA, so that'll be added. So we are adding improvements throughout the existing community, so this really blends in. This is specifically, Commissioner Thomas, to your question about the town of Parker. I just want to point out across the east side of South Chambers Road, that is track Q. We will go through the process of working with the town of Parker of ultimately dedicating or granting that to them. It probably has to be annexed and go through that parcel. We believe the trail connections have actually been satisfied already on the east side of Chambers. As you know, there's an 8-foot existing sidewalk that has been constructed there. There may be some additional spurs shown here in red, those 2 trails to Newland Gulch here or the Newland Trail here. But as we work through that process, when we dedicate that land, we believe we'll work with the town of Parker to finalize those spurs and what is important and what that connection is. The access that they were talking about is when we asked for access to Chambers Road on the west side of the road, they said for them to grant that access, they would like us to build an decel lane, an entire new lane for the entire length of our property. So we are now building an extra lane here all the way from Main Street to the bottom of our site. That is in correspondence with first Douglas County and then the town of Parker. That is for the 3041 horizon widening of Chambers, but we think it's appropriate to go ahead and build that. So Commissioner Thomas, we're going to build that as part of this process, and then we'll work with the town of Parker on those ultimate trail connections when we go through that dedication process. The other thing I'd just like to say, staff went through the proposed conditions. We are in full support of those conditions as they exist today. We've worked very closely with staff on all of that. We believe here again that the site plan is in full compliance with the approval criteria. I will say proactively, and I'm happy to answer questions on the Centennial Airport. Commissioner, you are correct the way that you asked it. That was directly from their comments. This is in the airport influence area, as is most of Meridian, all of Meridian. So we will go through the disclosure process that we have. There are some homes in the area that have navigation easements on them. These are not required, but we absolutely will go through the full disclosure process for our buyers that we do with all of the other properties. So all of Meridian falls in the airport influence area, and we know that process very closely, and we'll work with Centennial through that process. So with that, we certainly believe we meet the approval criteria, and we'd appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bachner. Additional questions for the applicant?
I have one on page 14. Oh, no, it's page 21. And this is a letter from Phil Sage. And it says that the phasing includes construction start winter of 2020. So since it's snowing out there now, is this winter of 2020?
I think this is still winter of 2020, and it may go on for a while. So we're hopeful to start as soon as possible, yes.
Okay, so we're not waiting till December.
No,
Okay.
I think this is the winter. We're still calling this winter of 2020.
Thank you.
I would just say first and foremost, we always appreciate when Shay comes out, you do a wonderful job. Certainly you specifically, Marcus, connecting with the community. You always host a number of meetings and connect really well with citizens. I continue to have some concerns with regard to that avigation easement. I appreciate the disclosures. One of the pretty stern recommendations from the airport was to have the 7-day noise test. Did you guys do that?
I'm going to let Ryan answer part of that.
Ryan McDermott, MCD, ERMED, Shea Homes, 9380 Suite 600, Station Street, Lone Tree, Colorado. Yeah, so a little bit longer history, if you'll bear with me. You know, the Stepping Stone is a much bigger community than these last 135 units. There's 900 homes originally platted and now developed and built within the Stepping Stone community. So early on, obviously, we got a lot of these referral responses, worked hand in hand with the airport. We did all the 7-day noise tests. We've done them kind of throughout the filings. And then, as Marcus mentioned, this is within the airport influence area, but is not within the required easement area. A small portion of Stepping Stone is, and in those areas that it is required, we do have easements and navigation easement over the top of those areas. If you're familiar with it, which I'm sure you are, the actual airport easement area falls more on the far western side of Stepping Stone and more impacts the future Ridgegate development. There's that's the straight flight path into the airport, candidly. So that's where a lot of those documents are recorded or preferred to be recorded against. So the western portion, or excuse me, the eastern portion, which is this side, is up against Chambers, not necessarily required to have an easement, although it's disclosed with our disclosures to the sales, during the sales process. And yes, we have previously done that 7-day noise study. We did not in this case for two reasons. A, we're familiar with it, and B, this site's about 30 feet lower in grade than the other site, Stepping Stone. So the existing Stepping Stone sits up kind of on a plateau, and this is down at the bottom of Chambers Road. So we didn't necessarily go through the noise study this time, but we had plenty of history with previous noise studies for Stepping Stone.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. So how did the previous noise studies come back?
Oh, you're going to jog my memory here. I mean, there was definitely, so typically on noise studies, you have certain, and I'm not going to be able to quote the numbers to you, but certain noise tolerance, right? There's XYZ noise. And depending on how many dBAs those noise are, oftentimes you're required to do additional improvements to homes. So you might have to do triple pane glass versus double pane glass, or thicker walls for insulation to kind of buffer some of that noise that might be there. So in this case, none of those noise studies came back with any sort of those recommendations. We have done a project previously going even further back off Peoria Street where we had some of those conditions that had to be met because we're that much closer to the airport, where we had to do triple pane glassing, thicker insulation, 2x6 walls versus 2x4 walls. There's certain construction obligations you have to meet in order to make life easier on your future homeowners. But none of this site was impacted by Centennial Airport in that fashion.
Well, Mr. McDermott, I appreciate you entertaining the inquiry with regard to noise. I sit on the Centennial Airport Authority Board and as well as the Noise Roundtable. So oftentimes we hear about the impacts after the development, and it's only continuing to increase. I'm sure on that line you're familiar with Metroplex and what's coming in the future with regard to the changes in flight patterns. Can you share with us what kind of analysis Shay did with regard to Metroplex and that impact?
I am actually not familiar with Metroplex and that impact. I don't know if Marcus or anybody else is.
Okay. Staff, I don't know if you've taken a peek at that or reflected on that in your analysis. Okay, well, thank you. Looks like our council may have a potential comment or two.
Well, with respect to Metroplex, I have been looking at that at the request of the board and working with both Arapahoe County and the Airport Authority. And I can say that I am not sure there would be any impacts to this particular area at all. The main change in the Metroplex plan is a route that's being referred to as the Bronco route, BRNKO. That route, instead of coming in from, all Bronco routes come in from the northeast, but instead of approaching from the east side of the airport, they're now going to circle the metro area, come down over Longmont, and approach Centennial Airport from the west. So they would actually be further away from this site than they might have been previously. And then they're probably going to land on the north-south airport that's the main runway. According to Metroplex, all flights are going to enter those flight paths at the same location and height that they did previously, maybe even on a steeper descent. So ideally, and as planned, they would have less impact than the current configuration. So with respect to this site, from what I've learned about my research, I can't articulate any impact to this site.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad you had that information. You might thank County Council later.
Question for Mr. Pochner. Thank you, Ryan. So we had some of the additional information we received from Parker, and I think you might address this, want to make sure, but they request that it's either cash reimbursement and or improvements related to the existing regional trail offsite track Q. Did you address that when you were referring to additional trail improvements?
Well, and Commissioner, I want to be sure. I think what we believe and what I believe Douglas County staff has argued as well or corresponded back to them is this roadway or the sidewalk connection on the east side of Chambers has been constructed. So that requirement of the PD that asks for a regional trail connection has been satisfied. That is there today. So that is the argument, is basically that has already been satisfied. We are doing this now roadway connection as part of the access to Chamber roads. I'm acknowledging that we still have to go through the process, Commissioner, to dedicate or grant this land to the town of Parker, Track Q. And as part of that, I am sure there will be additional discussions about these two spurs of trail connections that are shown. We just think that's entirely appropriate to do during that process directly with the town of Parker. So we believe that that requirement of the 8-inch or the 8-foot trail has already been satisfied. Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. Any further questions for the applicant?
I have none, thank you.
And I have none, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I have none. Thank you. At this time, I'll open it up for anyone in the audience like to address the board regarding this application. Seeing no one, I'll close public testimony and bring it back to the board for any further discussions, questions, and or motion.
You know, I believe that staff through council has provided some salient information with regard to the noise patterns, so I'm satisfied that the Bronco route may actually improve the impact from a noise standpoint. I'm still somewhat concerned that the 7-day noise test was not conducted, and I don't know if either of you have any concerns on that level or you're satisfied that the comments made by the applicant are sufficient.
So I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner Layden. When I read that page in the file, originally I thought, I think it's in the CARA section or something like that. But then when I read through the rest of the letter, it explained why it really was not required. And so that satisfied my concerns about that issue.
And I'm the same way after I read further into it, I understand too. And I realize the airport receives complaints all the time. Hundreds, literally. And for them to ask that is not out of the question, but it's not required. So I look at it from not required, and I think there was an explanation. I really appreciate the explanation, especially being 30 feet lower than some of the other housing or existing housing. So I had no concerns.
Okay, well, that certainly helps me. And when I read the rest of that too, and certainly with regard to the Centennial Airport review area, the CARA overlay district, in our zoning resolutions, it's not located within a safety zone or noise zone. I understand that. Just wondering if there may be at some point some further discussion around the consistency between that and the AIA with the airport authority. But that's certainly not ripe for today's consideration.
I will note too, and I appreciate that the applicant is willing to address that and to the sales to let that be known. One of my concerns has always been, and I think I've certainly had this conversation with Attorney Ingalls, how do we put it actually into the deed? And I don't think it's really possible to do that. So what happens on the first time the sale is sold, the house is sold, yes, they're notified, but it's the second time they're sold as many times when it doesn't get notified. And I don't think there's any way we can really address that. And I think we've approached it from a legal side to see if we can put it as into the deed, but I think that's one of the challenges we see, that someone said, well, I was never notified. Well, it was from the original sale. So, but thank you for being willing to make that a condition or make sure that that will be said on the first sale. I had an additional comment.
While you're looking for your comment, I'll just add that when I went through the staff packet, there were the criteria that were listed in the packet, and I went through all of those, and I find that this project does meet all of the criteria.
That was my thought. Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. I was searching for that.
And I would echo that. I believe that all the legal criteria have been met, and certainly compliment and appreciate Shay for making those overt disclosures to your potential purchasers. That certainly makes your lives easier, our lives easier on a variety of levels, better for our citizens. So thank you for that, and I'll be in support of this application.
So we've already heard that the applicant was in favor of all 6 conditions, I believe, as identified in the staff packet. I'll prepare for a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve Meridian International Business Center filing number 7C, Fifth Amendment, with the 6 conditions as presented, project file SB 2019-063.
Second.
We have a first and second. No further discussion. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Congratulations. Thank you. Brings us to our next item. C and D, I think, will probably be presented together, even though we'll have separate motions on C and D, I believe. So we have the subdivision improvements agreement and intergovernmental agreement for Solstice, filing number 3, project file DV 2019-235, presented by Chuck Smith. I think will probably do the presentation if needed for the SIA. And in item D, Solstice filing number 3, the final plat, project file SB 2019-043, presented by Eric Pavlik for staff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Eric Pavlinek, representing Planning Services. The project before you is Solstice Filing 3. Project number SB 2019-043. Shay Holmes is the owner of the property. As part of this presentation today, I will also provide information on the Subdivision Improvements Agreement, Intergovernmental Agreement, SIA-IGA for Filing 3. The request is for approval of a final plat consisting of 157 single-family residential lots, 6 tracts, and associated public roads on 44.86 acres within the Plum Creek Plan Development. This is the third phase of development within the PD. The intent of the final plat process is to provide for a review of the final engineering plans, subdivision improvements agreement, public dedications, and other legal agreements. The final plat process begins with a submittal of an application, following a review period by referral agencies and the public, and final acceptance of all engineering plans. The request is considered by the board at a public meeting. Public comment was received from one neighboring property owner within Plum Creek Acres. In general, comments focus on topography and building heights adjacent to their property. The site outlined in red is approximately 1 mile north of the intersection of Roxville Park Road and West Titan Road. This is an aerial of the property. The site is bordered by the Highland Canal to the west, Solstice Filing 1 to the north, and Roxville Park Road to the east. Single-family residential lots within View Ridge and Plum Creek Acres are located south of the project site. The site was rezoned from Agricultural 1 to Planned Development in October of 2016. The preliminary plan for Solstice was reviewed and approved by the board in December of 2017. Solstice Filing 1 was approved by the board in October of 2018, and Solstice Filing 2 was approved by the board in January of this year. The application proposes 157 single-family residential lots. All lots meet the minimum separation distances required by the PD, which is 100 feet from the southern property boundary and 75 feet from the property boundary of the Highline Canal. Roads are to be public and dedicated to the county. Following are some site photos. This is a view looking north across the site. This is a view along the southern edge of the site looking west. And finally, a view along the northern edge looking southwest. These are the approval standards applicable to the final plat. A detailed assessment of the project's compliance with all standards is included in the staff report. All engineering plans, studies, and reports have been reviewed and approved by engineering. Staff has evaluated the final plat request in accordance with Article 5 of the subdivision resolution. Required improvements are identified and secured through the SIA-IGA for filing 3. Action on proposed condition number 1 is required prior to action on the final plat. Condition number 1, prior to the board's action on the final plat, the subdivision improvements agreement, intergovernmental agreement, SIA-IGA for filing 3 shall be approved by the board. Condition number 2, prior to recordation of the final plat, capital mitigation fees in the amount of $1,605 per lot should be paid to Douglas County School District in accordance with the Plum Creek statements of commitment. Condition number 3, prior to issuance of each residential building permit, the applicant shall provide payment to Douglas County for the pro rata share cost towards improvements to the state highway system in accordance with the commitments set forth in the Plum Creek PD. Condition number 4, during construction activity within the development, the applicant, its successor, and assigned shall take all reasonable care to watch for historic resources, paleontological resources, and other cultural history resources, and shall immediately notify the county in event of such discovery. Condition number 5, prior to recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall provide evidence that existing well number 50367 was successfully plugged and abandoned. Condition number 6, tract K within Solstice Filing 1 shall be dedicated to Douglas County prior to issuance of the 500th building permit within the PD. Condition number 7, prior to recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall relocate existing well easement PH 12. Condition number 8, prior to recordation of the final plat, all technical corrections to the final plat exhibit shall be made to the satisfaction of Douglas County. And condition number 9, all commitments and promises made by the applicant or the applicant's representative during the public meeting and or agreed to in writing and included in the public record have been relied upon the Board of County Commissioners in approving their application. Therefore, such approval is conditioned upon the applicant's full satisfaction of all such commitments and promises. Section 504.06 of the subdivision resolution set forth the parameters for the board's determination of final plat request as noted on the slide. The SIA-IGA for filing 3 is a 3-party agreement as noted on the slide. The purpose of this agreement is to provide for the completion of improvements associated with Solstice Filing 3 as noted on the slide. Two motions are necessary from the board. The first motion would be made for the SIA-IGA, followed by a second motion on the final plat. This concludes my presentation. I am available to take any questions at this time. Otherwise, Marcus Parkner is here to present on behalf of Shay.
Thank you, Eric. Questions for staff?
I have none, thank you.
And I have none, thank you.
And Eric, can you just clarify that the engineering department agrees and accepts that the SIA requirements have been met?
Yes, Public Works Engineering has accepted all reports and plans, and the SIA-IGA is in form for approval.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
This time, Mr. Buckner.
Good afternoon. Marcus Pockner, PACHNER, 130 Rampart Way, Denver, Colorado. I know they're pulling up our slideshow. Thank you all very much. We have been working on Solstice, as you all know, for 5 years, 5+ years now, and we're now moving through the filing 3. And I will give you an update on the progress that we actually have home sales now occurring on site. Just to go through a couple of important dates here, the preliminary plan approved in 2017. That's what guides a lot of our documents and a lot of the architecture homes and style of homes and separation that we're going to talk about today. Filing 1 plat was actually approved back in 2018. That is well into construction, including a lot of the roadways. We were here last month for filing 2 and then today for filing 3. Some important things, the major tasks that have been completed recently, the grading for all of filing 1, model homes are under construction and opening, and we also have an IGA with the county and Denver Water on the drainage into the Highline Canal. Just again showing you in reference to the overall site, the entire 1,100 acres. Here are the 157 lots that are in filing 3. This is located immediately west of Roxborough Road. As you know, we do relocate that roadway sometime in the next 6 to 7 months, but this shows immediately adjacent just west of existing Roxborough Road. This shows a phasing plan that just shows kind of the lots that we're planning first, starting with kind of the northwest portion of the site. It drains to the northwest and then to the south, and kind of the eastern part of the site will be the second phase. It shows our storm sewer connections that are, of course, comply with those initial homes. This shows the Metro District improvements by Maryville Metro District. Phase 1, the trails, again corresponding with the homes, and then they're in purple as we develop those homes and actually making that ultimate connection to Roxborough Road. That's a very important trail connection. We actually have pedestrian and equestrian trails in that area that connect and take it all the way out to the state park. This shows a little bit more on specific parks dedication. We have 4.4 acres of parks dedication, just parks in this. We have about 15 acres of open space. Generally, this is part of the Highline Canal plan, and really bringing that back. As you know, that construction is going on right now and the revegetation of the Highline Canal. That's a very important part of filing 3 and really the connection of this site to both sides of the Highline. This shows some of those images that I believe you've seen before. It shows kind of the ribbon of the Highline that runs throughout this site. We are immensely proud of this agreement that we've been able to work out with the county and with Denver Water. We think this is absolutely a great pilot program for all of the Highline, and we are adding almost 4,000 plants back into this area of the Highline to really revegetate that, and most importantly, put some water back into the Highline to water that vegetation. This shows the equestrian trails, a couple of images of that, and the trail connections from the 2 roadway crossings that go over the Highline. This again, just in larger view, shows the trail connections throughout the whole site. You see the red pedestrian trails that we have spent so much time really working with the existing community, not future residents, but these are really based on the existing community and how to integrate this to the surrounding community to really honor the character surrounding it. You see the blue equestrian trail. This was an important addition that we did last month when we were here, that we're actually making now a full connection here on the equestrian trail, taking it all the way out to the park. This shows a little bit about our community outreach, the process we have gone through. We think it is imperative that we continue this process. We have had 4 neighborhood meetings here in 2020, including 1 last week. We have also had 1 community meeting. We will continue to do that throughout the process, even as we're well into construction. These are almost site-by-site issues that we're working with adjoining neighbors, and we think that's a very important process that we continue. This shows something that you all have seen many times. This is actually one of the first images that we created on this site, and it was actually informed by all the neighbors to the south of us. You can see that what has been imperative about this site is the buffering and the transition. What we were told is to really separate from the existing homes, whether that's berms, buffers, to allow kind of a wildlife passage, but how important it was to protect that natural separation. We also heard about some important view corridors, and we started to honor those, and we've really tried to protect those throughout this entire process as well. These are some images that we actually prepared for all of the neighbors. So right in the middle of the site here is Roxborough Road. So this is filing 3. There are 6 homes immediately south of us that touch the site, of course, the Plum Creek neighborhood all the way to the south. What has been so imperative to them is you see all of our trails are north of the Tributary B connection, a future Sterling Ranch connection here, or waterway that goes there. This is the trail connections are north of that. There wanted to be separation there. So we've had our trails behind the berms to really provide kind of a natural transition from the neighborhood. You can also see that we really tried to work with the existing neighbors to understand their view corridors and protect those. We went so far as to say, here is this home, and here is a perspective, of course, purely graphical, but we tried to give everyone an understanding of what it would look like. West of the Highline Canal, we have had single-story ranch homes for a variety of reasons, but everything east of the Highline, including this area, we've always shown 2-story traditional homes. It's kind of a family neighborhood. So we showed 2-story homes where people could really understand that natural transition, then getting to the trails, and you can see our depiction of what those 2-story homes would look like. We did that all along these homes here. This is 2 homes to the east, or to the west, excuse me. Again, understanding the grade changes, how the trails interact with that. We wanted people to have a realistic view of what their future view and that transition to this site would look like. The last one is this final view that looks, they kept a view corridor along the Highline Canal. So again, we wanted people just to understand kind of that transition as it comes to our new homes. We went further here in this neighborhood. We've actually spent probably the most time with the neighbors just to the south of us to really understand what these transitions should be. One of the neighbors actually that you'll hear from in a few minutes had a very specific request. He said, we'd like to have, Mr. King, we would like to have 200 feet of separation, and a very specific request to have 230 feet of separation of structures. In other words, from existing homes to future homes. That was a very important corridor. So we've really looked at this. As you can see, our minimum separation is 200 feet. Yes, in the requirement, it says a minimum of 100 feet, but we said in the site plan we bring forward, we will have 200 feet. We have 200 feet here. What is probably most notably, that's the closest one. What is truest here is when you look at this, and I'm sorry, these are hard numbers to read, but we then looked at the separation of structures. This house here, which is the King household, to the next structure is 516 feet. The first home here is 380 feet. These are about 225 feet. That's the closest that we have. So we thought it was absolutely imperative. We agreed with them that there be this separation of structure. The key to that, and one of the things that they're certainly here to talk about, is that we hope to preserve view corridors for the existing neighbors. We think that's a very important thing. Unfortunately, we're not always able to promise whether that will change existing mountain views. We look at those view corridors and you can tell that we have looked at how do we maximize existing view corridors to try to protect those views. So I do want to acknowledge, we went so far last week, we did not know the answer to what the impact would be on a few specific views. So once we knew from Shea Homes what the homes were going to be, right? As you all know in this filing process, it does not have the actual homes, the height, any of the site plans or architecture that goes with that. When we knew what Shea was suggesting to build there, we actually went and shot the foundations, top of foundation, and hung balloons to the worst case scenario so people could actually see what the impact was to their mountain view. Unfortunately, not all of that was terrific news. We did change some views of the mountain corridors, and we think we actually may have some solutions to that, something we're very open to continuing to work on outside of the filing process. So that's a little bit of a preview, probably what you're going to hear from the King family, but I'm anxious to kind of come back and address some of their comments. I will say the difficulty here is that we have worked on the grading and the overall site. This Bright Sky Lane here is already built, and this site drains to the northwest. So that sets the height of this entire area. That infrastructure is already in. So it is very difficult without knowing the actual homes. We believe that we're actually able to solve some of the issues you'll hear about by working with some of the actual height of the homes that will be built. So I'm happy to come back and talk about that. I think what we wanted to do is just provide that as a foundation and then know that we'll be available for any questions or rebuttal based on any comments that they may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pochner. Questions for the applicant?
You've answered all my questions. I do have questions about the J. King emails in the packet, but I understand you'll get to those, so I appreciate your information.
Yeah, I would echo my fellow commissioners' sentiments. I had a question about Mr. King, and that's really a hallmark of your presentations, Mr. Pochner, to really address those with the citizens, and they're even here, so that's wonderful. Looking forward to that.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Pochner,
sorry.
just a comment from you, really just to address, you did a little,
Yeah, I apologize, yes.
no problem. You addressed it a little bit, what dictates the height, and I think you said it very well. It certainly is the lay of the land. And I just want to point out the importance, and maybe you can elaborate on that, because we certainly have to be concerned with drainage, and it comes up to flooding to other properties, water quality, erosion, and we see the challenges with the Chatfield Reservoir. So maybe just a little comment on that, because I think you touched on it, and maybe just elaborate a little bit more for the audience.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the challenge of this site is it's a very complicated site. And one thing that I'll mention particularly is not only the roadways that are constructed, but as you all know, we have an agreement to drain water into the High Line to allow this revegetation to occur. One of the other things, the hallmark of our discussions with the county and with the neighborhoods has to take drainage, to capture drainage from the existing neighborhood and take it into our site. So that challenge means moving to the northwest, taking it to the Highline Canal. As you all know, south of this area, we've had a lot of discussions about some periodic flooding that happens with Tributary B. We are actually recapturing that, taking that water out of the neighborhood and actually taking it here to the Tributary B Canal now. And that's why we are not draining this way. We're draining to the north. So you are right, Commissioner. We have met all the standards. Those are set by different roadway heights. Actually, the High Line height, the girders of the High Line set that as well. So we're meeting all of those requirements, and that's a really important part of that. The difficulty, if I may, of the filing is that it doesn't have home height attached to it. Back in the PD that you all approved back in 2016, we're actually allowed to build up to 45-foot homes on this site. We do not think that is appropriate. We are talking about 30-foot homes on this site. So all of these things play into it, but you are absolutely right. We are meeting all of the engineering requirements. It's just difficult to know that actual final impact on individual homeowners, and that's why we're trying to work through that process now.
Very well. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. No further questions for the applicant? Very good. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you.
This time, I'll open up for the audience. Anyone in the audience like to address the board regarding this application? And if you would please feel free to come forward. And if you have any additional
I have
exhibits.
handouts, we have a PowerPoint.
Okay.
And I don't know how to set all that
Sure,
up.
and Mr. Engels at the end will take your exhibits, the handouts you have. And I'm just going to assume you're Mr. King. So when you address the lectern, if you would state your name, spelling your last name, and provide your record. And what we typically have done on public comment, we allow 3 minutes. So I realize you have a PowerPoint, so we can hope to incorporate your comments in a PowerPoint. You know, if you have I'm going to assume wife here, I'm going to just make the comment, say if it's that time versus splitting into 2 people, it would actually take more time. Why don't we just have you go forward with it's within that?
The handouts I've been submitted are being labeled Exhibit 2, and they'll be handed out now.
I'm even having someone else do the clicker so that I go fast.
So I'll just remind you, name, the spelling, and address.
Okay, yes, J. King, Jayking. My address is 10973 Roxborough Park Road, Littleton, Colorado, 80125.
Thanks. Just whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. I first began working with the county and Shea in July of 2015 to make sure that the 2035 CMP Policy 2-6B2, which states blend the existing character of adjoining developments with the design of new developments, In September of 2016, I spoke to the council representing over 80 homeowners in the adjacent neighborhoods via a signed petition to assure the blend from Soltis development to the southern border existing estate residential homes was met. We were successful to get buffers between us and the beginning of 1 to 2 story houses that were going to be in Soltis. At that point, we began to ask if there was going to be any rise in topography and large amounts of fill. We were provided the following renderings from Shea showing 2-story houses, but you will notice none of them are walkouts or garden level homes. We were told the land was fairly flat with a slope to the west, so likely only 2 to 3 feet of fill would be needed in some areas, and all that would be addressed in future filings. And now we're at that filing. So June 26, 2019, after getting the e-referral, we emailed Shea, can you share what your plans are on topography and housing maximum roof peak heights? And I hope that you're not building up the land in this section. In July of 23rd of 2019, we emailed Eric Pavlinek asking, so I asked not to approve this filing until myself and other residents get a chance to view and comment on cross sections to make sure those are part of the full comments. So 8 months later, basically, not until February 13th of 2020, Shea emailed us that the filing 3 lot elevation exhibit, as you can see, with some top of foundation numbers. On February 21st, 2020, Shea did a balloon float to represent the top of the roof peaks on lots 49 and 50, which is in that furthest corner away from our house as Marcus demonstrated. This is where and when it became evident that there was a tremendous amount of fill being brought in. Later that day, Shea sent over the lot types showing mainly walkout basements along the southern boundary of filing 3. And they sent over the cut and fill exhibit showing massive fill rising across the property north to south with fill as high as 8 to 10 feet in some locations. So this is in effect adding an additional story to their proposed 2-story houses from our neighborhood's perspective. So these walkout basements will appear to be 3-story homes, and with roof peaks close to 40 feet tall, which is the equivalent of a 4-story building. So imagine coming out of your own house, looking across the street, instead of a house there is now a looming 4-story building. They also sent over a May 15th, 2018 variance request letter in which they only offered to do this massive infill as a solution, which the motivation, for my opinion, is for raising the land, creates greater views and walkout basements, which equates to more profit to the builder. The good news is, in this short amount of time, we took a look at it, and we have another viable solution that I discussed with Eric in Planning and Chuck in Engineering yesterday over the phone. Instead of the property sloping to the northwest with large infill without affecting the slope of Bright Sky Lane, which it is already in, we can follow the natural slope to the west without raising the land, seen here. Create a slope down to the southwest corner with a retention pond in the southwest corner, that should say, that can tie into the Highline Canal and the drainage of other parcels. So we are asking the council not to approve today's request and have Shea come back with a filing that is more representative of blending and flow from our neighborhood to theirs, so we do not have looming structures as proposed in this current filing. And if there's any other reference materials that are not in the packet, I'd be glad to provide those.
Thank you, Mr. King. You did very well in your time. So, anything else?
No, if you had any questions, I'm open.
No, very good. We'll have the questions addressed at the end of public comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience like to address the board? See no one, we'll close public comment. And we'll first ask Mr. Pochner, the applicant, to address some of the things you heard in the public comment.
Yeah. Can we go back to our presentation? Yes, I'd be happy to. And first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. King. We have a very long history of working with Jay and Libby and and their family, actually very specifically on this site. And I know they're bringing our presentation back up, but actually the shape and outline of our site plan is based on a lot of their feedback. Another thing that we've done, I think very importantly, is their driveway, a Douglas County roadway right in front of their house. We've actually regraded that so that drains into Tributary B, again, moving everything to the north of this area. In no way am I going to talk about kind of an engineering side. I'd be happy to go through that. I think one of the challenges, and if you have specific questions, our engineer would be happy to address those, is that the roadways actually set the height here. So the drainage solution that you heard about to drain to the west does not change some of the challenges from the existing roadways and the requirements that you have from the county for those. You could break the site, if you will, and drain to the south, but that changes all the layouts and it really doesn't solve it. We actually spent a lot of time with our engineer over the weekend looking at what that does. And actually, the truth of that matter is if you drain this way, is the homes in this area actually have to rise to offset that to drain to a low point. The one thing I want to show here is just a slide that we could not agree more, and I'm sorry these numbers are really hard to read, how important it is to transition from the neighborhood. This is the King household right here. Their elevation is 5,552 feet. The home that is in this view corridor, lot 49, is just under 2 feet above that. It's at 554 or 53.9. So we are less than 2 feet above their grade. That is a very natural transition. The fill that we are having to do is because of the roadway here and draining this there. So there was always going to be some fill there. I want to say we're not just ignoring his comments, though. We think that there are good comments. We think that there are things that we can fix in the filing and perhaps outside of the filing as well. There has been this notion that walkout basements is something that we did purposefully. That's actually just part of the site, and as you grade it and go through that. If there is some desire, these walkout basements here, these are walkout basement lots, we are happy to give that up. That would change that view corridor. Doesn't necessarily change the height of the house, but you don't see that basement level. So that is something we're more than happy to address. As you know, as you heard from me earlier, these are the closest lots to the existing homes there. We're happy to do that. I will also say that one of the challenges of what Mr. King is laying out here is all of that, we can go through the drainage, but it's actually about the height of the house that you put on the site. Again, we could build up to 45 feet. We don't want to do that, right? So we're actually looking at, are there some house types, some solutions here in this view corridor specifically for them that may actually recapture that view for them? We floated those balloons at the worst case scenario, meaning our tallest house product there. So we are willing to entertain looking at some different house solutions there in that corner to reopen that view for them. So I will just say, and we have a number of exhibits here that go through all our cut and fill, the high point, how it's driven here, how we've worked with engineering, and our engineer can go into great detail on those. One of the hallmarks of the solution that we have is draining to the high line and moving it away from the existing neighborhood. The challenge here, the solution could maybe pick up 2 or 3 feet in a few areas, but it doesn't solve the issue at all. That doesn't recapture that. Actually working on a different house type may be able to recapture that view. So we'd like to continue to work with the King family. We're certainly willing to talk about if people want us to give up those walkout basements here, we're willing to do that. And then moving forward, when we get to the house series, to kind of see if there's a solution there. So that's my first comments. Again, we can go through any detail that you'd like from an engineering perspective, but I think that's our first response to Mr. King.
Anything further, Mr. Bachner?
I think that is all I heard. I think the last thing I will say in defense, this has been a challenge to prove this up, right? I think one of the things that's hard about this is, in the filing doesn't have any of the homes. So the reason it's taken a little while here until the last number of weeks is we finally had what homes were going to be on that site. So it's not been about roadway height, it's about the home that lies on there. So that's why we actually went to the extreme. We didn't know the answer when we wanted to float those balloons last week. We said, hey, we don't know the answer, but we're happy to prove it up for you. So we actually did that, went out of our way to hang T-posts at top of foundation and prove it up. And now that we know the result of that, we're willing to continue to work with them to find a solution.
Very well.
Great.
I'd like to have you comment. And
Eric, would you be able to put up the conditions of approval, specifically number 9? And Mr. Proctor, I think you're probably aware of it, that anything that is stated in the public record. So I just wanted to have you clarify that so we all hear what is the consideration, because, you know, even though it may not be a written condition of approval, can you help clarify to some degree what Shea is willing to propose here regarding Mr. Hill and what you demonstrated to us already?
Absolutely. I think most notably, and I'd, if I may, for Mr. King, the response that we heard, I think really two things: their specific view and kind of the buildup of the area, and then those walk-up basements. So I think in that section closest to the homes, the existing homes, we're certainly willing, if you all think that's appropriate, to change that from walkout basements. If that's fine and we change that view corridor, we're willing to give those up, change that. So that actually, I believe, would be part of the filing. That's something that's in the filing. Outside of the filing, but part of the record, we are certainly willing to look at that specific view corridor of the King, something that we focused on a lot, and see if there are a few changes that we can make in the house product to try to gain some of that view back. I can't guarantee in any way that it'll do that, but we're certainly not going to put the maximum height homes there. We're going to look at other products to try to recapture some of that view for them.
Very well. Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Proctor. And I would apologize, Mr. King. I said Mr. Hill. I apologize. Mr. King. Additional questions for the applicant?
I have none, thank you.
You know, I just have a couple of questions for staff. So, Eric, in your analysis in the packet, when you reference 50301 approval criteria with regard to the CMP policy, you speak to the ability to sort of blend with the natural environment. Mr. King raised the issue of CMP policy 2.6b about blending the existing character of the adjoining developments with the design of the new developments. I guess my first question is, does your analysis change it at all? Is it different based upon what we heard from Mr. King today? And perhaps secondly, if the applicant's willing to bury the basements to improve the view corridor, does that comport with CMP policy 26B?
This is Jeanette for staff while Eric's looking at this. I think policy 26B is kind of in a section of the comp plan where it's talking about transitioning between residential and non-residential. But clearly there are lots of policies and goals in the comp plan that deal with compatible, residential to residential. So having seen the analysis provided by Mr. King, it certainly looks like some of those, that 3-story appearance on the backside of some of those homes is maybe less than desirable, and I think we'd certainly support a restriction that would say 2-story or 1-story with a walkout. For our purposes, it might be good to know exactly which lots we're talking about. I know that the applicant's making a commitment on the record, but sometimes, it's good to actually know which lots you're talking about. And I think even looking at what other product types might be available to break up that kind of intermediate mass of homes would be good to look at as well.
Well, thank you for that. And I don't know if Eric is still looking, but I'm not sure if the suggestion of Mr. King is to deny the application and for the applicant to have a conversation with staff about those specifics. I think we heard today that Mr. Proctor is already prepared to make some of those concessions on the record. I don't know if the applicant is prepared to identify specific lots. And would that be an additional condition of approval?
I think so, because I think we'd actually probably add a plat note to that effect as well, that maybe would capture those elevation restrictions. I think we'd need to take a break, though, to kind of figure that out if we're going to continue today.
Mr. Proctor, there is a request from staff to have a discussion with you, and we can take a short recess here if you would.
That'd be terrific.
Be agreeable with that? Okay.
Sure.
So let's take a short recess. Could you 2 to 3 minutes, or do you need longer than that? We'll try 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll say about 3:50.
Great.
So after the conference committee, I think we're ready to reconvene. Call us back to order. And I will address Mr. Prochner or Eric, would you like to address this first?
So maybe if you want to read them and then have them point. So we have some proposed conditions that we'll suggest to you, but then we thought we would have Marcus point out which lots that these conditions relate to.
Great, thank you. And again, I think we have a grading plan here that actually shows the type of lot. So this was in our backup slide, but this may be helpful. So these green lots here that's a walkout basement. So those green lots are what we're talking about. I just want to be clear why we're going to choose some specific lots here. This is lot 52 and this is lot 60. We're suggesting that all 52 through 60, all of those lots be changed from the current walkout to either a 2-story home with a B lot, meaning no walkout basement, or a 1-story ranch home with a walkout basement. So it has the impact either way of reducing that and kind of changing that view corridor or the view that Mr. King described. So again, we're articulating that we believe lots 52 through 60, we should change those from walkout basements. Additionally, and if that's okay, we have shown a number of times this view corridor that goes right from the King's house. You can actually see how they're designed and built on that view corridor to lot 49. We will work on, and I know staff has probably worded it much better than I will, finding a home type that is less than the maximum height that we showed. We will find a solution there, try to find a solution on lot 49 to reduce that building height, that maximum peak of the home, to try to restore the view corridor there.
Eric Pavlinek for staff. I could read the 2 additional conditions that we discussed. Condition number 10, prior to recordation of the final plat, a plat note shall be added to restrict home elevations on lots 52 through 60 to either a 2-story home or 1-story ranch with walkout. Condition number 11, the applicant shall consider alternative home elevations for lot 49 to minimize building height.
Acceptable conditions to the applicant?
They are acceptable, yes.
Okay, very good. Any discussion from the commissioners regarding those 2 additional conditions of approval?
I have none, thank you.
Well, I just wanted to thank staff and the applicant for being so nimble, for working with our citizens, and for finding a way to arrive at a solution quickly. That's very appreciated.
Great, thank you.
Any further discussion, deliberation from the commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add that I've gone through all of the criteria, and I believe that this project meets all the criteria required.
And I would agree with that.
And I would too. So. Accept a motion.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion to approve the subdivision improvements agreement and intergovernmental agreement for Solstice filing number 3, project file DV 2019-02-235.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, state aye.
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 Aye. The motion passes.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion to approve Solstice filing number 3, final plat, with the 11 conditions as presented, project file SB 2019-043.
Second.
We have a first and a second. No further discussion. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Congratulations, and thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. King and family, for joining.
Right there.
Our next item on our agenda is under the public hearing. This is Sterling Ranch Preliminary Plan Number 5, Project File SB 2019-004, presenting for staff, Dan Avery.
Thank you, Commissioners, for your patience. This project is the Sterling Ranch Preliminary Plan number 5, project number SB 2019-004. Sterling Ranch LLC is the owner, and Mark Kiefer and Brian Hart are the project representatives. The applicant proposes 351 single-family homes, single-family detached residential lots, 1 superblock lot, 28 tracts and associated public roads, and private alleys on 156.02 acres. Approximately 51 acres of the development lie within non-residential tracts, including 14 acres of future regional parkland, 9 acres adjacent to the Larry D. Moore Water Treatment Plant, which do contain Dominion Water and Sanitation District water tanks, and other landscape, drainage, and open space tracts throughout the development. The intent of the preliminary plan process is to provide for an in-depth analysis of the proposed subdivision, including a review of the design, considering the ability to obtain water and sanitation, identify geologic hazards, environmentally sensitive areas, wildlife habitat areas, sources of required services, vehicular and pedestrian circulation, storm drainage and water quality, relationship to surrounding land uses, and conformance with the master plan. The preliminary plan process follows our standard land use review process, begins with submittal of an application, followed by a referral period to agencies and the public. There are then public hearings before the Planning Commission and then this body. At its January 27, 2020 hearing, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this request by a vote of 6-0 with staff's proposed conditions. The applicant and Dominion Water and Sanitation made presentations to the Planning Commission. There were no members of the public in attendance at that meeting. The Planning Commission asked clarifying questions regarding topics including the applicable per unit fees charged to the application, phasing of Waterton Road construction, comments related to Roxborough Water and Sanitation District's water line, water supply and water conservation, dark sky lighting within the community, and also wildlife impacts. The site is located in the Sterling Ranch PD, south of Sterling Ranch filings 1, 2, and 4, and approximately 1 mile south of Titan Road, 3/4 of a mile west of Moore Road, and 1/2 mile east of Roxborough Park Road. So very central to the PD, internal to the PD. Sterling Gulch forms a natural separation between this development and filing 4B to the east. The project is separated from the Larry D. Moore Water Treatment Plant by a small landscape buffer and trail corridor on the southern edge of the development. A future regional park will abut the project to the west, and a Denver water line can be seen on this exhibit running diagonally adjacent to the site. There is an Aurora water line that traverses the site from north to south, and a Roxborough Water and Sanitation District water line that exits the treatment plant and connects to Plum Valley Heights to the east, bisecting this development. That line will need to be relocated as this site development progresses. The Sterling Ranch PD was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners in July of 2013. The first phase of development was approved in 2015 under the title of Filing 1. The Filing 2 plat came in 2017. Preliminary Plan number 4 was approved in 2017 as well, and subsequent final plats in 2018. Preliminary Plan 3 and Final Plat 3A were approved last year. This, for reference, this exhibit north is to the left. This application proposes, as I've indicated, 351 residential lots and 1 superblock for future development. The superblock was initially proposed for consideration as a possible school site. However, the Douglas County School District determined that the site was not suitable due to its location near the water treatment plant. As a result of ongoing discussions, the school district and the applicant have agreed to evaluate a school site within Preliminary Plan number 6, an application that's currently in process to the south and east of this plan. Approximately 51 acres of the development lie within open space or other non-residential tracts, including regional parkland. There are several regional trail corridors shown here as dashed lines that traverse the site, running either through the site or adjacent to the site. The improvements associated with these trail corridors would be secured through final platting. Each of the tracts proposed is to be owned by the Community Activity Board, with the exception of the 9-acre Tract O, which is to be dedicated to the Dominion Water and Sanitation District to contain its water tanks. The future alignment of Waterton Road runs along the south and east edges of this project area. Here's a view from the southern edge of the development, looking north-northwest across the site. This gravel road generally follows the alignment of future Middle Fork Road. And here's a view of the northern portion of the site looking east towards filing 4B, which is under construction in the distance there. And a view from the northern portion of the site looking south-southeast back across the subdivision with the water treatment plant at the top of the hill, upper right in the picture. These are the approval standards for a preliminary plan, which are discussed in greater detail in my staff report. Most of the referral comments for this application were standard in nature. There were more specific comments from the Roxborough Water and Sanitation District and also the school district, as I've alluded to. Regarding the Roxborough Water and Sanitation District, there was initially concern about how that Roxborough Water and Sanitation District water line would get relocated. Dominion, Sterling Ranch, and Roxborough have since met and discussed alternatives for relocating that water line. And in a letter dated November 1st, Roxborough Water that indicated that it is now confident that with continued coordination, we can address these issues in a manner that is satisfactory to all parties. As I discussed previously, staff has also worked extensively with the school district and the applicants on school siting. The school district requested a site within this filing, but ultimately declined to accept the offered site. The school district and applicant are now evaluating a site to the southeast. This would be further evaluated through future land use applications. Separately, the school district and the applicant are working towards a dedication agreement that would ensure that adequate sites are reserved within the project area and dedicated upon request by the school district when a school is actually programmed for construction. These are the standards for the review of water supplies within Sterling Ranch via the approved water appeal. These standards and the applicant's water supply plan are discussed at length in the staff report. At the preliminary plan stage of review, the appeal requires that the applicant demonstrate a water supply and delivery system that is sufficient in terms of quantity, quality, and dependability. Should the board find that the approval standards for this application are met, the following conditions should be considered for inclusion in your motion. 1, prior to board consideration of any final plat within the preliminary plan 5 area, a subdivision improvements agreement, intergovernmental agreement shall be approved and included and shall include appropriate provisions related to the completion of the regional water pipeline for permanent water supply delivery. 2, prior to recordation of any plat within preliminary plan number 5, the applicant shall provide payment in the amount of $1,500 per single-family detached unit to the Douglas County School District for capital mitigation. For multifamily dwelling units within the final plat, the applicant shall provide payment in the amount of $750 per unit to the school district for capital mitigation prior to site improvement plan approval. 3, prior to recordation of any final plat within the preliminary plan 5 area, the applicant shall provide payment to Douglas County for the pro rata share costs towards improvements to the state highway system in accordance with the commitment set forth in the Sterling Ranch Plan Development. 4, standard condition, technical corrections shall be made to the record copy of the preliminary plan as needed to the satisfaction of Douglas County. And 5, the board's standard condition, all commitments and promises made by the applicant or the applicant's representative during this public hearing and or agreed to in writing and included in the public record have been relied upon by the Board of County Commissioners in approving the application, and therefore such approval is conditioned upon the applicant's full satisfaction of all such commitments and promises. Section 40506 of the subdivision resolution sets forth the parameters for the board's consideration of a preliminary plan request. I'll take a moment to let you review that. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm available to take questions you may have of me. Otherwise, Mark Kiefer and Brian Hart are here on behalf of Sterling Ranch. Dominion Water and Sanitation also has a brief overview and status update for the commissioners this afternoon.
Thank you, Dan. Questions for staff at this time?
I have none for staff. Thank you.
And I have none for staff. Thanks.
And I have none. Thank you, Dan. And Mr. Kiefer, I think you know the routine.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chairman Partridge, Commissioner Thomas, and Commissioner Layden. My name is Mark Kiefer, Kieffer, 8155 Piney River Avenue, Littleton, Colorado, 80125. I'm with the Sterling Ranch Development Company tonight. So, as usual, your staff has covered a lot of our presentation, so I appreciate that very much, Dan. I think it's also a testament to your staff's comprehensive review of our applications that they've come on over the past several years. And so I'm basically just going to fill in a couple of the blanks that have been outlined by your staff. So with that, I just want to also introduce that some of the folks that are with me this afternoon. Brian Hart from Redland Engineering is going to be joining me up here at the podium. He's our site civil engineer. Cassie Slade from Fox Tuttle, our transportation engineer, should there be any questions about transportation. And Curtis Davidson from PCS, our land planner and landscape architect. And as Mr. Avery had mentioned too, after my presentation, we're going to turn it over to Mary Kay Provoznik from Dominion Water and Sanitation District to just give you an update on some of the water issues that have been ongoing since 2015. So with that, I just wanted to give you a context of where we're at with Preliminary Plan 5. This particular plan is essentially the heart of Sterling Ranch. It's surrounded entirely by our project. It's one of the internal properties that we have and probably unique in that sense that it really becomes the hub of the wheel for the rest of all these various filings that we have been working on over the past several years. In that sense, a lot of these particular elements within Preliminary Plan 5 are essentially linkages that ultimately bind or tie all these various planning areas that we've been working on to connect both in terms of transportation but also trail corridors as well as parks. Just as a quick illustration here, this particular portion, this illustration shows Preliminary Plan 5 in conjunction with existing Preliminary Plan 4 to the northeast, and then future filing 6, which is currently in review right now with your staff. Waterton, and actually better illustration here. Well, let me, before I go into that next slide with Waterton Avenue, as Mr. Avery had mentioned too, what we had originally proposed within this plat, or plan rather, about a year and a half ago, about 18 months ago, included a school site, which is depicted here in that brown area, C5. That particular site was, at least on our original master plan, as was shown as a K through 8 site that we had an initial agreement with the school district on, but over the course of their investigation the past year, they determined it, as Mr. Avery had mentioned, not suitable for a school site. I think the findings that they had in that particular report that made them come to that conclusion was its proximity to the water treatment plant that Roxborough has adjacent to that particular area. We're reserving that site within the Preliminary Plan 5 as a future development area, not as a single family site, but probably something a little bit more akin to a multifamily site or a little bit more density in conjunction with a regional park assemblage that would be happening in that area as well. So with that, just want to show you how our particular open space frames Preliminary Plan 5. One of the unique aspects of this project is that it does show that there are various connecting points, if you will, through this site, one of which is the Aurora water line, which is that central spine that runs through the middle of the project there. That presented our designers a lot of challenges, as well as our engineers, in terms of how to fit that into the overall planning concept within Preliminary Plan 5, but also within our overall master plan. What we've chosen to do is create a linear park with that particular area, and we'll go into that in further detail later in the presentation. But working with the city of Aurora, particularly making sure that whatever uses that are going to be allowed within that area are compatible with their existing water line. Similarly, to the west of the site, that diagonal line there is the Denver water line as well. So again, presenting another challenge to the site in terms of how this particular type of development would fit in within this framework. We've also included that area within what would be considered future tracts of open space and preserved for the city and county of Denver, or Denver Water Board. So with this, I just want to also show you a larger context in terms of where this particular preliminary plan 5 sits. Preliminary plan 5 being these two areas right here, Waterton Avenue, Waterton Road, in this area here, leading to essentially the southern connector with this roundabout. Again, here's the Aurora water line and Burns Park, a future regional park that essentially becomes the centerpiece for the overall development in Sterling Ranch. Coupled with that too, there's several trail corridors that do connect through this area, regional trail corridors that do accommodate both equestrian and pedestrian uses. And again, it's part of what has been described many times as I've been in front of you, as well as from our consultants, that this is really the centerpiece of our planning efforts here, is tying together each of our neighborhoods with parks and trails. So it provides an alternative to our residents, as well as people that live outside of Sterling Ranch, to traverse our whole project without ever being on a road specifically. So with that, I just wanted to give you a quick, just a bit of a detail. So this would be the Aurora water line again. So left on this is the northern portion of the project, and south would be the connection that ultimately connects to Waterton Boulevard. As you can see, there are amenities that we're planning within this area that would come out in the final plan or the final plat. But we're looking at a series of small pedestrian areas that ultimately become playgrounds, use areas, and the like for our future residents. One of the unique aspects of this, and I'm just going to turn this over to Brian Hart right now, one of the unique aspects of this is how all those uses coincide within this open space corridor. And I think, Brian, if you want to say a few words about that.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Brian Hart. Address is 1500 West Canal Court in Littleton, 80125. As Mark mentioned, this is Middle Fork. Or at least some sections of Middle Fork. This is the street that Mark described here a moment ago in terms of kind of being a transportation hub, north and south, but it also accommodates the Aurora water lines. And just to walk you through these slides here, or these pictures here, this is a section in one particular location. And what's important to note here is the water line is roughly offset to the west just a little bit, but the grade difference between the roads and where that water line lies is very important. Not only to us, obviously, from a development perspective, but also for Aurora Water, so we're protecting their water line. And then some of the areas that we've identified for some passive open space, so those are some examples of where those are in that linear park. So that's kind of a highlight of Middle Fork, and that's a theme for the whole corridor for Middle Fork from north to south, through preliminary plan 5. Maybe a little bit more where the project sits. As Mark had mentioned, future Burns Park is actually located to the west. This is the Denver water line here that really defines the west boundary of the project. Dwellings 4B and 4C are located to the northeast. This is, of course, Middle Fork, as mentioned a few times. And then maybe a little bit more definition in terms of where Waterton Road is located. That is the project that's being worked on under a separate application as we speak, actually. And it really defines kind of the southern edge of the project, too. So, bigger picture, connectivity throughout the project. Mark had mentioned Filing 5 being located in the heart of Sterling Ranch, and it really is the case. Filing 5 is here, both centrally located north and south and east and west, and to highlight some of the future connectivity. Middle Fork, obviously, as mentioned previously. Waterton Road, this is obviously a larger context from Titan Road to Moore Road, all the way over to Rampart, so that's the project that's being worked on now. The Southern Connector, Douglas County's project to the east. Sterling Ranch Avenue, a portion of which is being constructed right now for filing 4, and then future extensions would come over to Rampart. And of course, you've got Roxborough Road, and then Eagle River is the road that's probably the most complete. It serves filing 1, filing 2, filing 4A, and 4B. So that's where it sits from a connectivity standpoint. And then maybe a brief description of a few projects that you've heard about related to Sterling Ranch, some of the things that have been ongoing, maybe a quick update. Number 1, Titan Road Phase 2, if you've been out there recently, is nearing completion. Winter isn't exactly the best cooperator along that, but we are getting close. Waterton Road, as I mentioned, that is that is one big project now. It'll be submitted in phases this year, so 2020 is a big year for Waterton Road. And the intent is to be building that as soon as possible. Sterling Gulch, that's the drainage project near Moore Road and Titan Road. That's actually completed now. And of course, all along, we're going to be extending utilities and infrastructure for the residents for each specific filing. And then lastly, and you'll hear about this a little bit more from Mary Kay Provoznik, is the Eastern Regional Pipeline Project. So that's maybe a quick overview of some of the engineering concerns. I'll go ahead and sit down, have Mark conclude the presentation, but I'm, of course, available for questions too. So.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to close with some of the approval criteria that, again, reiterate some of the points that are made by your staff in the staff report. I just want to touch on a couple highlights. And again, something that at least I'm proud of saying about Sterling Ranch is how this really does embody the healthy communities idea of both, as emphasized within the existing comprehensive plan for Douglas County, but also just in terms of how it really does benefit our residents. And we've been getting positive feedback all the time from all of our new residents, as well as people that are just coming in and looking at Sterling Ranch today. So in that regard, we're fully embracing that notion of healthy communities within your comprehensive plan. Some of the other aspects of it too, and again, this is a point that I think is well worth making, particularly in Sterling Ranch's case, that we do have criteria within our PD as well as design standards that if and when any archaeological or paleontological find is made, that's a tough word to say at a podium, you know, that they are identified immediately, and all of our contractors, builders and such within Sterling Ranch are on notice that they have to shut the project down and let you all know that these findings are there. And the reason why we like to kind of put that out front and center is that this is an area that does have some sensitive areas in history that we feel very strongly about preserving. With that too, we also have, Preliminary Plan 5 isn't adjacent or isn't directly impacting a wildlife corridor, but it is adjacent to a significant wildlife corridor that had been identified within our PD. So part of this discussion, as well as our subsequent Preliminary Plan 6 and our Waterton Road discussion, does incorporate a fairly significant element of trying to maintain this wildlife corridor that runs north-south through our project. Also with that, we endeavor to put together a road system, a transportation system, as well as a pedestrian and open space network that does provide our residents an ability to get through the project without necessarily using any specific roads. So those are also very important elements of our particular plan, but also I think epitomized by your comprehensive master plan. And then again, just looking at the technical support and everything else, I also like to acknowledge your staff, both engineering, planning, and the like, in terms of the effort that they put into this process as well. This is a project, like you've heard in your previous application as well. These are very complicated issues that have a lot of moving parts to them. And it does require a tremendous amount of effort on your staff's part to really work with us to solve some of these issues that come up in the design process. So in that regard too, we've also evaluated the site in terms of various environmental issues, both from a drainage perspective and geotech related issues. In all cases, I think that we meet and exceed those standards that are proposed in your codes, as well as maintaining our own standards within each of our building areas. And as I mentioned again, we do really embrace the whole archaeological aspect of this particular site. One other element, and I just wanted to reiterate, and I think Mr. Avery had mentioned this too, that we do prize our relationships with the outside agencies that we are involved with, including the school district, but also South Metro Fire as well, and Excel and several other agencies out there. So I would also represent this particular plan as being, again, a convergence of a lot of different ideas from these various entities. One of the pieces, again, that Mr. Avery had mentioned that spawned a new agreement with the Douglas County School District is this what I believe is a comprehensive approach in terms of site selection for schools in the future. So it's not just the next one that comes up, but hopefully the next several discussions that we will have over the course or the life of this project. So I think that this particular application in itself spawned that particular discussion with the district. And then with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Kay Provoznik for a brief overview of the water line and some of the water rights issues that are associated with this project. Mary Kay?
You have my presentation. Thank you, Commissioners. Mary Kay Provoznik, Provaznik. I'm representing Dominion Water and Sanitation District, 9250 East Castilla Avenue, Suite 210, Greenwood Village. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you again. It's been a very successful 2019, and so there are some exciting things that I wanted to walk you through. He mentioned 2015. In 2004, that's when the vision was for Dominion to be here to provide water service in this area. That service area of we have 33,000 acres, includes other communities, but includes the 3,400 acres of Sterling Ranch. And we've been building our water supply based off of strategy and innovation in finding a way to be reliable and sustainable. And the way we've done that has been integrating our water supplies and infrastructure of our partners, as well as the infrastructure that we've been putting in place. While those in our service area are not required to get service from us, we are open now to serve the customers, and that includes the Sterling Ranch of 3,400 acres, the Chatfield Valley framework entities that were identified in the plan development, as well as other retail water and wastewater districts that serve existing and future residents and businesses in our service area. The Dominion Board continues to review and assess ways to provide service to both existing and future customers to the benefit of both, and has adopted rules and regulations last year to include policies and procedures identifying the process for connecting these communities and potential new customers. And with that, Thunderbird is a recognized qualified provider for the Chatfield framework, and they have done a feasibility study to see how they could connect to us, and we look forward to working with them in the future to see how we can meet their needs. We are developing the flexibility and redundancy not available to most water providers in the state, and we're doing that through several independent water supplies being tied to significant regional infrastructure and partners, a redundant system of connection, pipelines, water sources, and storage, and ways to fully and efficiently use and reuse our water supplies. The bar chart on the right indicates that we have mostly renewable water, and then with the reuse, that we're up above 5,000 acre-feet in firm water supply that's either owned or under contract at this time. And with that, Dominion has satisfied the requirements of the firming service commitment IGA with Castle Rock with an initial maximum delivery rate of 0.69 MGD, which is more than adequate to deliver the 700 acre-feet. So that was one of the contracts that we had brought to you before, and we have finalized all of the requirements of that agreement. And also there are two agreements within our renewable water
for 480 acre-feet of permanent water supply. And as of September 2018, all the commitments of these two agreements have been met. A significant portion of our portfolio is the reuse of our water supply, which we will build the infrastructure to develop over time. 2019 was a good year for us. We satisfied the commitments with our partners for the Eastern Regional Pipeline progressing and the construction of a new lift station. This map shows our assets. So that we'll talk a little bit more about this pipeline. These three indicate T's that we have identified for potential connections to customers in the future. This high zone tank is a critical piece of infrastructure that will give us flexibility into the future, as well as provide fire flows for much of this area if they choose to connect to Dominion. Along with that is Willow Creek Lift Station for Filing 3 and Titan Lift Station here, as well as the Chatfield Basin Reclamation Facility. And I just also want to note that as of this year, we have purchased 500 acre-feet in Chatfield, and that is completed as well. That is not part of this supply, but it indicates how we continue to build the water supply into the future. So the best news, because it's all good news, this is the pipeline that connects up to the Roxborough water treatment plant in this area and connects down to Castle Rock. We are 80% complete with the line for Dominion as well as for the line for Castle Rock. This red area here indicates the area that we are currently doing construction, but we're very, very close and expect to have that completed this summer. So just to talk about the commitments to preliminary plan 5, there are often a lot of confusion around how much demand is happening because it keeps getting updated through the platting process. So I wanted to show the full total. We, at this time, the total demands with all of the filings and the preliminary plans is 1,136.9 acre-feet per year. The total supply we have, taking into account, well, that's without taking into account losses, is 1,145 acre-feet. Now that does take the losses. So what we're showing here is the water supply that was already committed, what's being committed to PP5, and this is a delivery loss to the water treatment plant. We talk about water supplies and measure them at the treatment facility at Roxborough. There's a lot of places in the system to measure the losses. What we're showing here is that we have adequate supply to that treatment facility to meet the demand standards that we have in place, which are measured at the treatment facility of Roxborough. On the wastewater side, Dominion has agreements in place and has developed the infrastructure needed for this preliminary plan application. Dominion owns the Chatfield Basin Water Reclamation Facility and ultimately will provide wastewater from that facility. The existing Titan Road lift station has the capacity to convey wastewater from preliminary plan 5. So the Titan lift station is here and it will lift it to the CBWRF, the Chatfield Basin Water Reclamation Facility. These are the same agreements and assets that the county reviewed and approved on all previous applications. Dominion will evaluate the facility expansion of the Chatfield Basin Water Reclamation Facility per the CDPHE permit requirements, which is when measured flow reaches 80% of the treatment capacity, we will start design. And prior to the measured flow reaching 95% of the treatment capacity, we will commence construction. Just to put that into clarification, we currently are seeing 0.04 MGD of measured flow, and the Chatfield Basin Water Reclamation Facility has a rated capacity of 0.6. So we're seeing about 10% or less of the current rated capacity of the Chatfield Basin Water Reclamation Facility. So that was just a brief update on some of the facilities you guys have heard about and that we're excited to say are well on their way. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Bosnick. Did I get it right this time?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, first time, I think. Any questions for Mary Kay Prosnick?
I have none. Thank you, Mary Kay.
And I heard completion by the summer. In the packet, it said 70% done, I thought, but you're saying 80%?
Yeah, old news. We're up to
Wow.
80% despite the snow. So if we can just hold off
Good news.
on the snow.
That's great. Thanks.
So that concludes our presentation. We're certainly available for any questions, any member of our team as well. So,
Any questions for Mr. Kiefer? Applicant?
I do have a couple. On page 307, all through the packet, it talks about a future regional park, a 14-acre regional park. Who's going to pay for that?
our CAB, Community Authority Board, that's something that we're building, and we're currently in the process of dedicating portions of it right now in this plat and subsequent plats. That's referred to as our Burns Regional Park project,
okay.
the central park through the whole project.
Okay. When I heard regional park, I thought, is the county going to be involved in this one? And it sounds like the answer is no.
No.
Okay.
We, if I can also say, though, we are working with your Parks Department to make sure that programming of that site is compatible with your existing parks programs as well. But it's a CAB, Community Authority Board, construction project and management project.
Perfect, thank you. There was some discussion in the packet on page 312 about an easement, some resolution on an easement with Roxborough Water Sanitation District, Water and Sanitation District. Has all of that been figured out?
Yes. There are actually two parts of that. One was an access easement off future Waterton Boulevard, and we have an agreement with Roxborough right now in terms of a future access road that would be replacing their existing road, which was always considered a temporary road. And then there is a water line that runs east-west from that to serve our neighbors to the east, Plum Valley Heights. So that's also being relocated with Roxborough's approval.
And in the packet, it did talk about the need to keep their road open while you're doing construction, and so that's been all worked out as well.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. So, Mark, thank you so much for the presentation. I think, first and foremost, we've had an opportunity to highlight some of the champions in our community, and certainly this developer and this community of partners has just done such an exceptional job. So, hats off for all the good news and success that we're getting to hear about today.
Thank you.
This question you might defer to Fox Tuttle on, perhaps, but it's related to the report on page 67. I had a question about level of service and traffic. So perhaps, Ms. Slade, you said on page 67 that one intersection is not going to meet the PD requirement for local level of service with and without the Waterton Road connection. And it looks like it's that Titan Parkway at Titan Park Circle. You say the intersection at Titan Park Circle operates at level of service F in the existing conditions. Can you speak to that?
Yes,
Okay.
Cassie Slade for Fox Tuttle, last name Slade. Address is 1624 Market Street, Suite 202. That's Denver. We just changed it. Yes, that you are correct. It's the intersection of Titan Road and Titan Park Circle. Today and in the future, it does operate at level of service F, which is technically the bottom of the grading system from an A to an F. What the traffic model is showing is that there are times that vehicles could wait over 2 minutes to get onto Titan. The interesting part of it is there's only a handful of vehicles, in a peak hour coming off of either side. But there's just a lot of traffic on the arterial that's delaying those few vehicles to get on and off of Titan. The volumes that are on those side streets are not high enough to warrant any sort of mitigation in the sense of like a signal or a middle left turn acceleration lane. There will continue to be a right turn acceleration lane. Wait, I'm sorry, that's at Moore Road. But it's just one of those intersections that has this low volume, high delay, and so it will remain LOSF in the future.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Slade. So question for staff, is that still consistent with your analysis on traffic?
afternoon, Commissioners. Deborah Kula for Engineering. Let's try this again. Deborah Kula for Engineering. Yes, that is the side street. It is connecting into an arterial. It is a much lower volume, so that level of service F is found to be acceptable for engineering.
Because of the low volume? Yes. Okay, thank you.
No further questions. This time, I will open it up to the audience for anyone who would like to address the board regarding this application. Seeing no one, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board for any further questions and further deliberation.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to put some information on the record that both the previous project we heard, Solstice, and this one participate in our VIP program, which is a voluntary improvement program plan to voluntarily provide money to the county for our traffic program, specifically Highway 85. And so I just want to put that on the record that our developers are being very responsible, and these are voluntary fees that they have committed to provide for the lots as they sell them. So there's a significant amount of revenue, and it is adjusted for inflation. So we don't always know what that number is going to be. It depends on when the sales take place. So I just want to put that on the record that these developers are paying their way. They are paying for growth when it comes to Highway 85 and our traffic. Also, when I read through this packet, I got confused because, again, these are voluntary school payments. There was one project that was paying $500 a lot. There was another one that was paying $1,500 a lot. There was another one that was paying $1,605 per lot. And so I called staff and said, help me understand why this is always different. Because if I have questions about this, I'm sure the public has questions about this. So I asked Jeanette to be prepared just to put this on the record so it's clear that we're not picking winners and losers, that the school district is involved in this process. So Jeanette, if you could just speak for a couple minutes about this, I'd appreciate it.
Jeanette Baer for staff. Is that on? I think so. Actually, since our conversation, I did directly contact the school district and said, could you just provide us with some information on how you come up with the voluntary capital mitigation fee? And this is what they said. For each new plan development project referred to Douglas County School District, a unique set of calculations are prepared to determine how many students are expected from the proposed development, the pro rata amount of land required to build schools needed to educate those students, and the pro rata cost to construct new schools that may be needed. In each case, the fees are negotiated among parties, which can result in different fees. So they look at each one uniquely, kind of, I think, that feeder area and the conditions in that immediately surrounding area and come up with the fee. And I do think it depends somewhat on the time frame in which the project was actually reviewed and approved through Douglas County.
So I appreciate you taking the time to get that even clearer explanation, so thank you for that.
Well, and I would echo my fellow commissioner. This particular developer has indicated a strong level of commitment, not only to the community, but in resolving future congestion issues. And so I think on that level, they're to be commended for that level of coordination. It's certainly significant for our residents.
Very good. Commissioner Thomas, thank you for bringing that up about the transportation, the voluntary transportation fee. And if I recall, it billed out Sterling Ranch will be somewhere around $38 million to the cost of the regional highway system. So it's very significant, and we really appreciate that. And it's common around the county, but they certainly have not squawked a bit. They've been very, very good partners with us. We really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Any further deliberation?
The only thing I'd like to say is that we have heard from staff, we've heard from the applicant. There are no citizens here to tell us that they have any concerns about anything. I've looked through all the approval standards. I see that Mr. Lytle is here. We often ask him what he thinks, but his letter was clear. Mary Kay Provoznik provided excellent information, and I believe that all the approval standards have been met, and I will be voting in favor of this project.
And I would concur with my fellow commissioner and will be in support of the application.
Very well. And Mr. Kiefer, can I have you accept the lectern, and there were 5 conditions of approval presented by staff. Does the applicant agree with those 5 conditions?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, with that, I have a motion to approve Sterling Ranch Preliminary Plan Number 5 with 5 conditions as presented, project file SB 2019-004.
Second.
We have a first and a second. No further discussion. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our land use and public hearing. We are adjourned.